PNC News First is presented by the Bank of Guam, the People's Bank. Pizza Hut, we're taking pizza to where it's never been before. Taco Bell, the only place where you live Moss. Colgate, the #1 brand recommended by dentists. And IT&D.
PNC News First, broadcasting live in high definition from Tumon, Guam, on KEQI and KTGM, and on KPPI on Saipan. Here is your PNC News Team.
Half a day and good evening. You're watching PNC News First. We are live from the broadcast center at Akanta. I'm Jolene Tovis. Thanks for tuning in. Topping our newscast tonight, the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center is finally moving forward. After 14 years, the permanent injunction placed on the department for shortcomings in the government's mental health services has been lifted. The injunction has been in place since 2005, and while the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center was facing a sanction for failing to comply with the orders of the permanent injunction earlier this year, it appears as though the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center is back on track. As Adelup Communications Director Janella Carrera says, the permanent injunction has been lifted. The permanent injunction was lifted by a federal judge, according to Adelup, who states that the judge recognized the tangible work being done to set things right. Governor Lou Leon Guerrero stated, "This moment doesn't mean that we will be perfect. It means that we have made things better but still have a ways to go." The injunction was put in place to force the agency to provide minimum care requirements for individuals with mental illnesses and developmental disabilities. In other news, the governor's office has confirmed that a team from the Army Corps of Engineers has arrived to assess the structural integrity of Guam Memorial Hospital. The team from the Army Corps arrived over the weekend and met with GMH officials this morning to begin their assessment. Last May, Governor Leon Guerrero met with regional representatives of the Army Corps and asked them to come to Guam to do the assessment. She said at the time the goal was to determine whether it was worthwhile to repair the current facility or whether Gov Guam will have to build a new public hospital. The 2020 budget includes an allocation of $10 million from the $22 million in revenues from the last fiscal year. However, BBMR Director Lester Carlson today cautioned that we need to know the results of the Army Corps inspection first.
We should really understand, what it is we're going to be doing there, and if the funds or the structural integrity of the hospital dictates that we go in a direction that results in a new hospital, then what would we be doing by putting $10 million in there?
The governor issued a statement this afternoon saying the administration is grateful to the Army Corps for working with GMH to assess the condition of the hospital. The assessment is expected to last about a week, and their report on the hospital's condition probably won't be released for another month. Besides the $10 million in the current budget for repairs to GMH, there are 11 bills pending in the legislature that would appropriate another $12 million for various other Gov Guam needs. All of them propose using what some of our senators have characterized as surplus funds or excess revenues. They are neither, says BBMR Director Lester Carlson, who told reporters today that the governor is committed to using whatever funds are left over from last year to pay down the deficit. PNC's Kevin Kerrigan reports.
There's no surplus when we have a deficit.
During the recently completed fiscal year, Gov Guam collected $22 million more than what the 2019 budget projected would be collected. The 2020 budget proposes spending $10 million of that $22 million on GMH. Another 11 bills have already been introduced to spend the remaining $12 million. However, that money is not a surplus, said BBMR Director Lester Carlson. It shouldn't even be considered excess funding.
I will be the first to admit that many of these bills are touching on needs that exist, but it is clear that we should not be using funds when we have a deficit. We do have an $83 million accumulated deficit.
Carlson made it clear that the governor remains committed to spending that money on paying down the deficit.
I wanted to take this opportunity to just continually set the record straight, that we believe that a prudent government should operate in a prudent manner, and that the funds that were received over the amounts authorized in that 19 budget will be used in this administration to pay down the deficit.
That doesn't mean that none of the pressing financial needs faced by Gov Guam won't be addressed. In particular, Carlson said the governor is developing a plan to provide more funding and personnel to the Department of Corrections this week, and it won't require any additional appropriation.
There are provisions in the 2020 budget that allow for what it is we're going to do.
The governor is expected to announce her plan to address the issues at DOC later this week. Meanwhile, the 11 pending appropriation bills have yet to have a public hearing, and Carlson has yet to submit a fiscal note on them. But when he does, he said each fiscal note will note no funds are available. Kevin Kerrigan, PNC News First.
Thanks, Kevin. Turning our eye to crime, convicted spice dealer Max On didn't leave the island intending to flee. Instead, his attorney, David Lujan, says it was out of desperation. Court documents state that on August 30th, On met with the U.S. Probation Office and expressed a strong desire to relocate to Orange County so that he may reunite with his family. But despite being advised not to leave, he hopped on a plane in October.
Some of it was misunderstanding, but part of it was really driven by desperation, because Mr. An was on the verge of being homeless, and so his kids sent him a round-trip ticket. I told the judge that, after he was arrested, he was brought to the, federal judge in Santa Ana, and the judge, once the judge understood that Mr. An has a round-trip ticket from Guam, Korea to LA and back, he released Mr. An and told him that, and allowed Mr. An to stay an extra 3 days in California, and ordered Mr. An to return to Guam via Korea.
On arrived on Guam on the 8th. The next day, he reported to probation, according to Lujan, who says that the court was satisfied with the explanation of the sequence of events and the violation will be addressed at a separate hearing. On is now staying with a friend, has surrendered his passport, and is required to check in 3 times a week, added Lujan. The violation hearing will be held on January 22nd, 2020. In other crime news, the case involving a conspiracy to smuggle contraband into the Department of Corrections cannot proceed any further without addressing matters of 3 remaining defendants who have yet to take deals in the case. Sentencing hearings for several defendants in the case were supposed to begin last week, but because the case involves 13 defendants and all but 3 have taken a plea deal with the government, those hearings will have to wait as a number of the plea agreements calls for cooperation, which entails testifying against co-actors in the case. To date, Roxanne Hokuk, Bruno Simmons, Jerry Hokuk, Ronald Meno, Frankie Roslin, Furman Maritita, and Jeff Limo have signed plea deals. Jerome San Nicolas and Ed Crisostomo are pending deals, while Leanne Cabrera is still on the run. In other news, a dead body was found in one of the concrete pavilions next to the tennis courts at the Tumuning Park this morning. Tumuning Mayor Luis Rivera told the Pacific News Center that a homeless person came to her office shortly after 7 a.m. this morning and reported to a staff member that one of his friends did not wake up. Mayor Rivera said that it appears that the dead man was another homeless person. She did not know the cause of death or his name. However, the mayor said there were no obvious signs of injury and she did not think foul play was involved. Scott Uggan, a homeless man at the park, told Pacific News Center that the dead man was his cousin, John Uggan.
Well, we spotted my cousin, we went into it, waking up to go drink coffee, and that's when we noticed that he was dead. We sent my cousin Luke to call the fire department, and my friend Ken called the mayor's office, and from there on they checked, they confirmed it, but they chased us away. So we couldn't say anything or do anything to contact the family or anything.
GPD spokesman Sergeant Paul Tapau said crime scene investigators were called to the scene and an investigation to determine the cause of death is underway. He did not confirm the man's identity. The body was removed shortly after 8 a.m. and brought to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy. Don't go away just yet. After the break, we'll look at the national elections in the Marshall Islands, GDOE's attempt to get out of high-risk status, and more.